Well, welcome to this week's video lesson. Today we're going to talk about how to organize and share your personal testimony. Your personal testimony is the elevator speech, if you will, on how you receive Christ, and you'll learn how to share your personal testimony in 90 seconds or less. Matter of fact, I'm going to do that for you here before we end this session today. Your personal testimony is based on how to organize your personal testimony. I take from Acts chapter 26. And what I'm going to do, remember now, you're writing this down. So make sure you got your journal and your pen and paper with you, because you're going to need to write down these 5 points I'm going to give you about your personal testimony. But they're all taken from Acts chapter 26. The first point is my life before I met Christ. Paul talks about that in front of King Agrippa in verses 4 through 11. So the first point is my life before I met Christ. Acts 26, 4 through 11. The second point is how I realized I needed Christ. You're going to pick this up in verse 12 through 14. How my life before I met Christ. Secondly, how I realized I needed Christ. Verses 12 through 14 of Acts 26. The third question, or point, is how I received Christ. Now this is in verses 15 through 17 and verse 20, the second part of the verse. I'll just say 20b. My life before I met Christ, how I realized I needed Christ, how I received Christ, and then fourthly, my life since I received Christ. My life since I received Christ. This is in verses 19 through 23 of Acts chapter 26. So let's look at them again. My life before I received Christ, how I realized I needed Christ, how I received Christ, and my life since I received Christ. And then you always end your personal testimony with this question: has anything like this ever happened to you? Has anything like this ever happened to you? Now, what I want to do is share with you my personal testimony, and I want to share it with you. I'm going to break it apart into the 4 sections and then the question, okay? My life before I met Christ. I was raised in church. I mean, I was Baptist before I was saved. I'm serious. I was a part of the cradle roll. My mom and dad had me in church when I was just a baby, fresh out of the womb. So my life before I met Christ is basically, I went to church my whole life. Every time the doors were open, we were there. How I realized I needed Christ, I never will forget that I heard the pastor say something like this. I was rather young, I was 7, but I remember the pastor saying something like this: just because you go to church that doesn't mean you're going to heaven. And that really depressed me, because what was I doing there? I mean, if what I was doing wasn't getting me to heaven, I'd rather be home doing something else. So, but he told me that I needed to receive Christ. So how did I receive Christ? He told us, I'm going to give you the churchy words here. He told us to come, we had an invitation. At the invitation, I went down and the aisle there, using all the churchy words here, and he took me to a room after the service, to a Sunday school room, and he told me that I needed to, basically the ABCs, to admit that Jesus was God, believe that He was the Son of God, confess Him as my Lord, and then deny myself and follow Christ. That's basically not quite in that fashion, but that was all included, in there when I was 7. And then my life since I received Christ, I've had a lot of life since I've received Christ. And I could tell you a whole lot about that. That's more in my story. But basically, here's the way I tell people that, I haven't been perfect since I received Christ. I haven't. But there's 2 things I know: that God walks with me every day, and when I die, I'll go be with Him. Then what's the question you always ask? Has anything like this ever happened to you? Now let me put it all together. I was raised in church from the time I was born. Every time the doors were open, we were there. I remember one day when I was listening to the pastor preach that he said, just because you come to church doesn't mean that you're going to heaven, that you're a Christian. And that intrigued me. So after the service, after the preaching was over, I went and I talked to the pastor. And he told me that I needed to give my life to Christ. Or the way we say it to children, I need to give my heart to Jesus. And that day, in my 7-year-old way, I gave everything lock, stock, and barrel to Him. Now, since then, I want to tell you, you do all your sinning after you become a Christian, when you're 7, when you become a Christian. And my life hasn't always been perfect, but there's 2 things I know. That Christ walks with me every day, and when I die, I'm going to be with Him forever. Has anything like this ever happened to you? I don't know if you were timing it, but I'm almost certain that's under 90 seconds. Take a little while to struggle a little bit with your personal testimony, your life before you met Christ, how you realized you needed Christ, how you received Christ, and your life since Christ. And then have a good discussion with your mentor this week. Now, next session is our wrap-up session about where do you go from here. So I'm looking forward to seeing you one more time as we wrap this up. Take care and have a great day.